My home always smelled of old cedar, beeswax, and peonies. That was the scent of stability, a scent I had built with my own hands, day after day, year after year, after my husband was gone. Many widows in my position would have sold this sprawling estate outside Atlanta, bought a comfortable condo downtown, and lived on memories. But I am not the kind of woman who surrenders ground. I restored this property stone by stone, turning a crumbling historical landmark into our family stronghold. I stood at the living room window, watching the autumn wind chase yellow leaves down the driveway. The glass was cold, but my hands were warm. I was accustomed to keeping things under control. The temperature of the house, the accounts of my company, and, or so I had believed, the well-being of my daughter Evelyn. Evelyn, my kind, luminous girl. She always saw the best in people, even where there was no best to be found. That particular quality was what brought Tyrone into our home. Tyrone Hall, 29 years old, a dazzling smile, expensive suits that fit him to perfection, and an absolute emptiness in his eyes whenever he thought no one was looking. For the past year, I had been reliably financing that facade. Trips to Miami, dinners at restaurants where the menus have no prices, designer watches he had supposedly forgotten to buy himself. I paid without comment. I told myself it was an investment in my daughter's happiness, that money was merely a resource, and a daughter's smile was worth any expense. But I was always watching.
The evening in question was a family dinner. Demetra, Tyrone's mother, sat across from me, a woman with aspirations to an aristocratic bearing that unfortunately cannot be purchased in a boutique along with a handbag. She held her wine glass as though she feared crushing it and kept straightening her napkin as though it were insufficiently white for her lap. "Naomi Johnson," she cooed, tilting her head slightly. "This roast is simply divine. You must have spent half the day in the kitchen." There was no gratitude in her voice, only a veiled condescension. "You cooked while we rested." "I have a wonderful kitchen assistant, Demetra," I replied calmly, slicing a piece of meat. "But I make the marinade myself. I like precision in proportions." Tyrone, who had been scrolling his phone, looked up at that. "Speaking of precision, Mrs. Johnson, Evelyn mentioned you ordered new roofing for the West Wing. That's a substantial expense so close to the wedding." I looked at him. His eyes held no concern for my finances. They were the eyes of an appraiser, worried that the current owner is spending too heavily on renovations to his future property. "That roof needs to stand for another 50 years, Tyrone," I said evenly. "I don't cut corners on foundations or protection. It's an investment in the home's future." Tyrone and Demetra exchanged a glance. It lasted a fraction of a second, a barely visible shift of the eyes, a slight nod from Demetra. If I hadn't been looking directly at them, I would have missed it. But I was looking. There was no respect for my work in that glance. There was satisfaction. The look of someone holding a lottery ticket they're certain is about to win. They were looking at my home, at the walls I had restored, the oak paneling I had commissioned from the finest craftsmen, as a prize they had already mentally divided between them. Of course, Demetra added quickly, smiling with only her mouth. The house should be in perfect condition for receiving guests. I did not ask which guests she had in mind. I simply continued eating, feeling the cold, analytical mechanism inside me begin to turn. Something was wrong. Too much certainty in their posture, too proprietary a tone. After dinner, I went to the kitchen to personally oversee the dessert. The dining room door stayed slightly ajar. The house had excellent acoustics, another detail I had restored with particular care. That crown molding in the living room is just oppressive. I heard Demetra's muffled voice, quiet but distinct. When we've moved in for good, we'll have to redo everything. And those old-fashioned wallpapers in the hallway. Tyrone, are you listening? Yes, Mom, I hear you. Tyrone's voice was lazy, satisfied. Just hold on a little longer. We'll start right after the wedding. The old woman won't object. She's completely devoted to Evelyn. She'll agree to anything for that girl's sake. And after that, well, you know the plan. I went still. My hand, holding the silver cake server, didn't tremble. Not by a millimeter. I simply set it down, carefully, on the counter. The old woman. Just hold on a little longer. The plan. They believed I was deaf, or so blinded by love for my daughter that I had lost the ability to hear the obvious. I stood there in my immaculate kitchen and felt not pain. No, pain is for those who don't expect the blow. What I felt was cold clarity. The puzzle had assembled itself. All those months, all those bills I had paid, all their whims and demands, this had not been mere spoiled selfishness. This had been preparation for a takeover. I picked up the dessert tray and carried it into the dining room. My face wore a polished, social smile. Cheesecake, my own special recipe, I said, setting the dish on the table. I hope you'll enjoy it. Demetra immediately spread her practiced smile. Oh, Naomi, you spoil us. I watched them eat and mentally compiled a ledger, not of food, of their mistakes. Their first mistake was in mistaking my generosity for weakness. Their second, they had forgotten who built this house. The evening ended. Evelyn left to walk Tyrone out, and Demetra stayed the night in the guest room. She complained of a migraine and asked permission to remain, as the drive was exhausting her. I agreed, naturally. Hospitality is a weapon when you know how to wield it. When the house went quiet, I didn't go to bed. I went upstairs. Demetra, judging by the sounds, was drawing a bath. Her door was slightly ajar. I am not in the habit of going through other people's things. That is beneath my dignity. But I am in the habit of checking that all is in order in my home. I stepped in to verify that fresh towels were in place, and my gaze fell on the nightstand. There, beside her cosmetics bag, lay a standard notebook in a leather cover, and on top of it, a measuring tape. A peculiar item for a woman with a migraine, wouldn't you say? I stepped closer. The notebook was open. Numbers and diagrams sketched across the page in sharp, confident handwriting. I leaned in. These were not abstract figures. 45 square feet, south-facing. Window replaced with panoramic. Walk-in closet to be expanded by taking space from hallway. I knew those dimensions. I knew them by heart. South-facing, 45 square feet. Those were the measurements of my bedroom, my personal bedroom, where I had slept beside my husband, where I had spent the past 30 years of my life. Demetra had not been measuring the guest room. While I was setting the table, while I was paying their bills, this woman had been walking through my home with a measuring tape, planning how to redesign my bedroom for herself. I closed the notebook carefully, replacing the tape at exactly the angle I had found it, corner to corner. They didn't merely want to live here. They were planning to remove me. I stepped into the hallway and turned off the light. In the darkness, my footsteps were completely silent. I had learned to walk quietly many years ago when I was putting a young Evelyn to sleep. Now that skill would serve me for a different purpose. War had been declared. They just didn't know it yet. The following morning, I sat in the library, reviewing final catering estimates. Sunlight fell across the oak desk, illuminating a checkbook open to a sum with 6 zeros. My pen-holding hand hovered over the paper. I was in no hurry to sign. Instinct, honed by years in business, whispered, "Don't rush." The door flew open without a knock. Tyrone walked in. He wore a white shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, and the expression of a man convinced he had just hit the jackpot. He didn't greet me. He crossed to my desk, holding a gray bundle, and dropped it into my lap with a casual smirk. "Try it on, Mrs. Johnson," he said. His voice rang with poorly concealed triumph. "I think the size will work." I looked down. In my lap, across my fine wool trousers, lay a wad of cheap, rustling synthetic fabric. A maid's uniform. Gray dress, white apron, cut from the kind of material that raises a rash on contact. The sort of thing they put on staff at roadside motels where they cut every corner. I raised my eyes to Tyrone slowly. My face stayed calm, though everything inside me had coiled into a tight spring. "What kind of joke is this, Tyrone?" I asked quietly. "No joke." He leaned his hands against the edge of my desk, looming over me. "Mom and I had a conversation and decided that after the wedding, the roles in this house are going to change. You're tired, Naomi. You're getting older. Managing an estate this size is hard for you. So Mom is going to be the head of the household." I looked toward the doorway. Dimitra was standing there, arms crossed over her chest, leaning against the frame. A thin, serpentine smile played on her lips. In her right hand, she was turning a set of keys, the antique brass keys to the wine cellar and the main pantry, which always sat in my personal drawer in the foyer. She had already claimed them. "As for you," Tyrone continued, nodding at the gray bundle, "you can stay. We're not monsters. We're not putting you on the street. But the free ride is over. You want to live here? Make yourself useful. Clean, cook, do the laundry, and maybe we'll give you a room in the attic." Silence settled over the room. The only sound was the floor clock ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The seconds of their impunity were running out, but they were too foolish to hear it. They expected tears. They were waiting for me to scream, to clutch my chest, to beg for mercy or appeal to their conscience. They thought I was broken. What a mistake. Instead of hysteria, I felt something lift inside my mind, as though someone had wiped the fog from a cold window pane. My last doubts, my last drops of mercy over my daughter's choice, evaporated. The people standing before me were not family. They were enemies, crude, greedy, and careless. I rose slowly. The synthetic rag slipped from my lap and landed in a shapeless heap on the Persian rug. I stepped over it without a glance. "So those are your terms," I said, in an even voice. "Exactly," Dimitra called from the door, jangling the keys. "And don't count on complaining to Evelyn. She does what her man says, as a good wife should." I said nothing. I took my phone from my jacket pocket, unlocked the screen, and pressed a speed dial. "What are you doing?" Tyrone frowned. Still irritation in his voice, not fear. "Calling the only person in this room whose opinion matters to me," I replied. The rings went on for a moment. Then Evelyn answered. "Mom, hi, we're just—" "Evelyn, listen to me carefully," I interrupted. My tone was cold and commanding enough that my daughter went silent instantly.
I switched to speaker. Let them hear every word.
I am in the library right now with your fiancé and his mother. Tyrone has just informed me that after the wedding, I will be working as a maid in my own home while Demetra takes my place. What? Evelyn's voice shook. Mom, what are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke? Tyrone lunged, trying to grab the phone from my hand, but I stepped back and raised a hand, stopping him with a look. This is not a joke, sweetheart. This is an ultimatum. Tyrone just threw a maid's uniform in my face, so here is my decision. There will be no wedding. I am canceling payment right now. I'm calling the bank and freezing all transfers. Catering, florists, the venue, everything is revoked. Mama, wait. Your future husband just crossed me out of his life. I articulated each word precisely, holding Tyrone's widening eyes. So I am crossing him out of the budget. Tell him he's free. I ended the call without waiting for a response. Tyrone's face twisted with rage. He opened his mouth but couldn't produce a sound. He stared at the checkbook on the desk, at the money he had already considered his own. I calmly picked up the checkbook, closed it, and placed it in the desk drawer. The lock clicked shut. You wouldn't dare, Demetra hissed, stepping into the room. Her aristocratic mask cracked, exposing something far less refined. We've already sent out all the invitations. This is a disgrace. The disgrace is what's lying on the floor. I nodded at the maid's uniform. Get out of my office, both of you. I walked past them toward the exit. My heart beat steadily. I felt no grief, no sense of loss. I felt the relief of a surgeon who has finally removed a tumor. I stepped into the corridor, but didn't go far. I stopped around the corner, pressed my back against the wall, and held my breath. Voices carried from the library. You're an idiot, Demetra hissed. I told you to wait. Why did you wash it with that stupid uniform? What does it matter? Tyrone shot back. She's just bluffing. Evelyn will work on her, cry a little, and she'll fold. I hope you're right. Demetra's voice dropped lower, nearly a whisper, but I heard every word. In any case, don't worry. Even if the wedding falls through, the deed of gift is almost ours. She won't be able to prove anything once the signature is in place. I went still. The deed of gift? I had not signed any deed of gift. Evelyn had said nothing to me about any such document. I exhaled slowly. So this was not simply greed and rudeness. This was a crime. They were not merely trying to seize control of the household. They were orchestrating a document coup. I straightened my cuffs and moved toward my private office in the other wing of the house. I had calls to make, and this time not to my daughter. I closed the door of my private office and turned the key twice. The click of the lock steadied me. This was my sanctuary, the place where numbers never lied and contracts were always honored. I opened the laptop. First, the bank. 3 clicks and the wedding account was frozen. But simply stopping the money would have been too blunt. That was defense. I needed offense. I dialed the director of the Grand Palais, the venue where the ceremony was to take place. Few people knew that through a complex chain of holding companies, I owned 30% of that complex's shares. To Tyrone and Demetra, it was simply the most expensive hall in the city. To me, it was my asset.
Good morning, Michael, I said the moment he answered. This is Naomi Johnson. We have a scheduling change for the 25th. Naomi, any issues with the seating? No, Michael. There will be no wedding. Instead of my daughter's reception, the 25th will host the annual charity gala of the Johnson Foundation. A pause. But the hall is paid for. The catering is booked. The decor. Leave the flowers. White roses and lilies will be perfect. The menu works as well. Just remove the wedding cake and replace it with a dessert station. And, Michael, I paused.
savoring the moment. Change the signage at the entrance. No names Evelyn and Tyrone. Only the Foundation's logo. Understood. Consider it done. I set down the phone. A warm satisfaction moved through me. I had not simply canceled their celebration. I had taken it for myself. Everything they had chosen, everything they had boasted about to their friends, would now serve my purpose. Next call. The florists. The same arrangement. Bridal bouquet? Cancel. Floral arches? Keep for the Foundation guest's photo backdrop.
While I was giving instructions, my phone chimed. An alert from the security system for the city apartment, the upscale unit in Midtown I had provided for the young couple, while their future wing of the estate, as they believed it to be, was under renovation. I opened the app on my tablet. The lobby camera showed Tyrone and Dimitra. Tyrone was pressing his keycard against the reader with increasing fury. Red light. Rejected. Again. Red light. I enlarged the image. His face was contorted with rage. Dimitra stood beside him, glancing nervously in all directions. 10 minutes before this, I had called the building manager. Stephen, I have reason to believe the keys to Unit 45 have been lost. For security purposes, please deactivate all duplicate keys except my master key right now, and instruct security to admit no one without my personal confirmation. I watched as the doorman, a solid young man who knew perfectly well who actually paid the service fees, stepped out of his booth. Tyrone was jabbing a finger at the entrance, waving his arms. The doorman stood like stone, shaking his head. You no longer live here, I whispered, watching the screen. I am no longer your future mother-in-law. I am your former landlord who has terminated the lease. Dimitra grabbed Tyrone's arm and pulled him toward the car. The phone on the desk rang. Evelyn's photo on the screen.
I let it ring twice. I needed to calibrate my voice. Not a wounded mother's voice, a detective's voice. The kind that already knows the answer before the question is asked. Yes, Evelyn. She was crying. Mama, what's happening? Tyrone called. He's furious. He says you froze the cards. They won't let him into the apartment. Mama, you can't do this. It's humiliating. Humiliating? I echoed, my tone ice cold. Humiliating is when your fiancé throws a maid's uniform in your mother's face. Did you ask him about that? He said it was a joke, a bad joke. He's nervous before the wedding. Mama, please unfreeze the accounts. She was defending him. Of course, she was in love with the person she believed him to be. But this was not the time for lessons about character. I needed to verify what I had overheard in the corridor. Evelyn, listen to me. I cut off her stream of justifications. Did Tyrone have you sign any documents recently? Yesterday or the day before? Documents? Well, yes. Yesterday evening he brought some papers for travel insurance. Said we needed extended medical coverage before the trip and something about luggage. There were 20 pages in tiny print. Tyrone said he'd checked everything. I just signed where he pointed. Where are those papers now? With Tyrone. He said he was taking them to the notary.
I closed my eyes. The puzzle was complete. The deed of gift is almost ours, Dimitra had said. They had slipped my daughter a property transfer document disguised inside a stack of insurance papers. And my naive, love-struck girl had signed away her own future. Evelyn, my voice went hard as steel. Don't ask questions. Just tell me where you are right now. I'm at the boutique for my second dress fitting. Stay there. Don't go anywhere. And under no circumstances, you hear me? No circumstances. Tell Tyrone that we discussed the papers. Tell him I just screamed and hung up. Do you understand me? Mama, you're scaring me. Do you understand me? Yes, I understand. I disconnected.
There was no time for emotion. They had made their move, underhanded and filthy. But they had made a mistake. They had left tracks, and they still believed I was simply an outraged old woman. I found the number from Marcus Chamberlain in my contacts. My old friend, the finest attorney in the city, and the keeper of all my late husband's archives.
Marcus, it's Naomi. Sorry for jumping straight in. I need you to pull the archives from 1998 and get your team ready. We have an attempted hostile takeover from the inside. I looked out the window. Clouds were gathering. A storm was coming. But I was ready for it. I was the storm. An hour later, the gate bell rang. On the monitor, Tyrone and Demetra. No trace of remorse on their faces, only irritation and poorly concealed anxiety. They had not come to apologize. They had come to reassert control. I pressed the gate release. Let them in. I needed them to feel confident. I needed them to talk. I received them in the small sitting room. The tea service was on the table, the collector's set that Demetra had been eyeing so rapaciously. I had even arranged for their favorite eclairs to be set out. The stage was perfect. A distressed mother, ready to make peace. Naomi Johnson! Tyrone swept in first, arms wide, as though he intended to embrace me. I took one subtle step back, placing the armchair between us. What is all this? Frozen cards, changed locks? You practically terrified us.
Terrified you? I repeated softly. Of course, Demetra confirmed, following him in. She looked immaculate, apart from the slightly smudged lipstick at the corners of her mouth, a telltale sign of nervous chewing. Naomi, darling, we understand. Age, nerves, all the pre-wedding stress. You must simply be exhausted. They sat on the sofa without being invited. Tyrone immediately reached for an eclair. That thing with the uniform, he said, waving a hand around his full mouth. It was just a prank. A bet with some friends. Terrible timing, we get it. A prank, I repeated, nodding. My phone, set to record, lay tucked in the lush arrangement of hydrangeas on the mantelpiece, directly behind them. Exactly. Demetra covered my hand with her palm. Her skin was cold and damp. Naomi, you need rest. Tyrone and I were just discussing it. Perhaps you should go away to a spa resort for a month or two. Restore your health. Calm your nerves. We'll manage everything here. We'll have the wedding, look after the house. By the time you come back, it will all be settled. I stared at them and marveled. They genuinely thought I was a fool.
A resort, I said, as though turning the idea over. That does sound appealing. Demetra's eyes lit with a predatory gleam. You see, I told Tyrone you were a sensible woman. So you call the bank right now and unlock the accounts. The caterer has been calling us nonstop. It's simply embarrassing. And we'll find you the most wonderful resort tomorrow. She pressed my hand more firmly. You understand, Naomi. Evelyn is very upset. You don't want to ruin her happiness over a case of nerves. A case of nerves. They were leveraging the most precious thing I had, my love for my daughter. And they were so certain of their victory, they hadn't noticed I had never once said yes. I need to think, I said evasively, and I need to see Evelyn. Evelyn is busy, Tyrone cut in quickly. She's resting. The stress of your call hit her hard. Better not to disturb her. Just give us access to the accounts. They were in a hurry. They needed money desperately. At that moment, the doorbell rang in the foyer. That must be the courier, I said, rising. I'm expecting important documents. Documents? Demetra tensed.
What sort of documents? For the resort, I lied, looking her straight in the eye. I asked my assistant to send over some options.
The tension on their faces eased into relief. They believed me. They were so accustomed to me solving problems at the snap of a finger that the possibility of doubt didn't occur to them. In the foyer stood a young man in the livery of the courier service Chamberlain and Partners. He extended a thick sealed envelope without a word. I signed for it. Returning to the sitting room, I found Tyrone and Demetra murmuring to each other. At my entrance, they fell silent and put on their company smiles. "Well," Tyrone said impatiently, "did you choose a resort?" "Not quite." I settled back into my armchair, the envelope in my lap. I could feel the weight of the paper inside. This was more than letters. This was the past that Demetra had worked so hard to bury. "You know, Demetra," I said slowly, "while I was waiting for these papers, I was thinking. You mentioned you were chief accountant at a major firm?" Demetra stiffened. "Yes, of course. Vertex Group. Many years ago. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." I began slowly opening the envelope. The sound of tearing paper in the quiet room was almost deafening. My late husband, Reginald, always said the world was small, especially the financial world. I drew out a thin folder from inside. On the cover was the logo of my husband's company, the same one he had closed 20 years ago before moving into other ventures. "What is that?" Diameter's voice cracked.
This, I said, opening the folder and withdrawing the first sheet, is a copy of a termination notice dated November 14th, 1998, issued in the name of Demetra Victoria Hall. That was your maiden name, wasn't it? The room went so quiet I could hear Tyrone stop chewing. "Reason for termination," I read aloud, not lifting my eyes from the page. "Loss of confidence following discovery of embezzlement in an especially large amount, and a handwritten note by my husband. Do not refer to law enforcement at the personal request of the employee, given the presence of a young child." I raised my eyes. Demetra went rigid, unable to speak. Tyrone sat open-mouthed, looking from his mother to me. "Mom," he managed, "what is she talking about?" This is a mistake," Demetra rasped. She tried to stand, but her legs weren't cooperating. "It's slander. I never—" "There is also your written statement here, in your own hand." I produced the second sheet. "And a repayment schedule for the debt you never fully settled. You stole from my husband, Demetra. He showed you mercy for the sake of your son." I looked at Tyrone, who had grown and was now throwing maid's uniforms in his future mother-in-law's face. "That was 100 years ago!" Demetra shrieked, losing the last of her composure. "It means nothing. The statute of limitations has expired." "The legal one, perhaps," I agreed, folding the papers back into the folder. "But in my home, the moral statute of limitations never expires. Did you think I knew nothing? Did you think I was just a wallet with legs?" "Enough!" Tyrone shot to his feet. "I don't care what happened in the last century. You are going to unfreeze those accounts right now." "Or what?" I said. "Or you'll tell Evelyn that her fiancé is the son of a thief her father chose to spare? Or perhaps you'll show her that deed of gift you slipped in among the insurance papers." Tyrone froze, his voice abandoning him entirely. How do you know that?" he whispered. "I know everything," I said, rising. "I know about Vertex Group. I know about the deed of gift. I know about your plans for my bedroom. And I know you are bankrupt without my money." I crossed to the fireplace and retrieved my phone from the flower arrangement. "This audience is over. You have 24 hours to collect your belongings from the city apartment. After that, I change the locks permanently.
And if you attempt to contact Evelyn before I have spoken with her, I will deliver this folder not only to her, but to every one of your social acquaintances."
They flew out of the house as though scalded. I watched them from the window. Demetra was furiously berating Tyrone, waving her arms. They were panicking, but they didn't yet know the most important thing. There was one more document in the folder I hadn't shown them. I returned to the library. In his haste, Tyrone had left behind his laptop, lying on the sofa, open, cursor blinking. I touched the trackpad. A password prompt. Predictable. Tyrone's thinking was an insult even to amateur code breakers. I entered Evelyn's date of birth. The system unlocked. The desktop was a chaos of folders. Wedding, cars, debts. The one that interested me was modestly titled Documents. I opened it. Inside, draft agreements, scanned IDs, and a file named Family Trust Final. I opened it. From the very first lines, the breath went out of me. Not from fear, but from an icy fury that instantly arrested all other emotion. This was not merely the deed of gift I had suspected. This was a meticulously detailed plan for my destruction. The document outlined the creation of a whole family trust into which all assets would be transferred. My estate, the city apartment, company shares, and even my personal savings accounts. Named as trust administrator, Demetra Victoria Hall. Beneficiary, Tyrone. And Evelyn, my daughter, was listed only as a person entitled to lifelong residency, with no right to dispose of any assets. As for me,
I scrolled to the section on provision for dependents. There, in plain black text, was a clause mandating my transfer to a specialized facility for the care of elderly persons with cognitive impairment, within 30 days of the marriage being registered. An address was even specified. I knew the place, a county care home notorious for its conditions. They didn't merely want to take my home, they wanted to lock me away and have me declared incompetent. I read on, and with each line my grip on the mouse tightened. They planned to sell my husband's art collection. They intended to cut down the cherry garden to build a 5-car garage. They had mapped out my life and death as a business project. But the worst was waiting at the end. In the annex to the agreement was a scan of the founding members' consent. And in the signature field, a bold, sweeping autograph with a distinctive flourish. My husband's signature. Reginald's. I went still. Reginald had been dead for 5 years. This document was dated this year. I enlarged the image. This was not merely a forgery. It was a high-quality copy extracted from an old document and inserted with photo editing software. But I knew my husband's handwriting better than my own. This signature had been taken from our old marriage documents to which only our family notary and the company archivist had ever had access.
And then it came to me. Demetra had worked in the bookkeeping department. She had access to the archives. She hadn't only been stealing money, she had been stealing signature samples, seals, letterhead. She had been preparing for this for years. She had waited for Reginald to be gone so she could use his name against me. She knew that Evelyn would never go against her father's wishes. If they had shown her this document and said, "Look, Daddy wanted us to create this trust to keep you safe," Evelyn would have signed everything without a second glance. She would have believed she was fulfilling her beloved father's final wish. They had planned to use the memory of my husband to destroy me and deceive our daughter. I closed the laptop. The sharp crack of the lid shutting sounded like a gunshot in the library's silence. No more mercy. No more restraint.
This was a war of annihilation. I took a flash drive, copied the entire document folder, sent the files to my email and cloud storage, and one more copy to Marcus Chamberlain, marked urgent, forgery analysis. I stood at the window. The garden beyond the glass was beautiful in the slanting light of the setting sun. My roses, my apple trees, my garden bench where we had drunk tea together on so many evenings. They had wanted to take all of this, to erase me like an inconvenient smudge on their blueprint for a beautiful life. I picked up my phone. This time, I dialed the head of security for my holding company. Devin, I need a complete dossier on Tyrone Hall and his mother. Everything. Violations, debts, credit history, associations. Dig deep. And put surveillance on their vehicle. I want to know what they're saying when they think they're alone. Dawn. Timeline? Yesterday.
I put the phone down. My hands weren't shaking. On the contrary, I felt a surge of clarity and strength. I now knew the full scale of the threat, and I knew exactly what to do.
The following day, Demetra appeared on my doorstep alone. She was carrying a box of Belgian chocolates. Her face wore the expression of a martyr prepared to go to the stake for the sake of family harmony. "Naomi," she began from the doorway, voice trembling with performed sincerity. "We need to talk. Woman to woman. Mother to mother." I showed her into the sitting room. I did not offer tea. I sat in my armchair and left her the hard chair across from it. "I'm listening, Demetra." She set the chocolates on the side table and clasped her hands as if in prayer. "Tyrone was wrong. He's just a young man who got confused. He wants so desperately to measure up to your world. But he loves Evelyn. And I want only what's good for everyone. Let's put this nightmare behind us. We're family." "Family," I repeated, as if tasting the word. "You know, Demetra, I've been thinking a great deal about that. About what family means. About trust."
I paused, watching her lean forward slightly, anticipating that I was about to relent. I was going through some of Reginald's old papers and came across documents from one of his companies, North Star Corp. Do you know it? I saw the corner of her mouth twitch, her clasped fingers clenched tight. "North Star Corp?" she echoed, voice climbing unnaturally high. "No, I never heard of it. Why?" "Just a thought," I shrugged. "There was an unpleasant business with it. A female accountant nearly ruined us. Reginald was furious. He said that kind of person shouldn't be allowed within a mile of other people's money." Demetra swallowed. A bead of sweat traced down her temple despite the cool room. "Terrible. But why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm thinking about the future." I leaned toward her and lowered my voice to a confiding whisper. "I'm getting older. Tyrone is right. Managing all of this is becoming a burden. And I thought perhaps he was right about the trust." Her eyes changed in an instant. Fear disappeared, replaced by greed. It was so naked, so repulsively transparent, that I wanted to wash my hands. "The trust," she said, wetting her lips. Are you serious?" "Quite. I'm thinking of putting the house into a foundation so Evelyn and Tyrone are provided for. But I need a reliable administrator, someone from within the family, someone who knows how to handle money."
Oh, Naomi, she spread her hands. That is the wisest decision. I would take care of every penny as though it were my own. As though it were your own? I echoed. That is precisely what I was afraid of. I opened the desk drawer and took out an old, yellowed photograph. In the image, a younger Demetra in a glittering dress stood beside the finance director, a champagne glass in hand. The same predatory smile, the same eyes. Strange, Demetra. You say you don't know North Star Corp, but in this photo from the 1998 company Christmas party, the woman in the front row looks remarkably like you. I placed the photo before her. She stared at it. Her jaw tightened, hands gripping the armrests. That's not me. That's just someone who looks similar. On the back it reads, Accounting Department. And then, D. Hall. That is your handwriting, Demetra. Your hand. She fell silent. The mask of the good future in-law slid off entirely. What appeared beneath it was something far less cultivated. And so what? She hissed, shoving the photograph away. Yes, I worked there. Yes, I took some money. I had a son to feed. Your husband was rich. He wouldn't have noticed the difference. We were surviving. You stole from the man who gave you a job, I said. And now you are trying to steal from his widow and his daughter. I am not stealing. She lurched to her feet, overturning the chair. I am taking what is ours. Tyrone deserves this life, this house, this money. And you are just a greedy old woman sitting on bags of gold while the young have nothing. I give the young every opportunity to earn their own, I replied calmly, not rising. I don't enable parasites feeding on someone else's work. Demetra came very close. Her eyes narrowed. You think you've won? You think you showed me an old photograph and I'll run away with my tail between my legs? You're wrong. The wedding will happen, and Tyrone will have this house. And if you don't unfreeze those accounts, I'll go to Evelyn. I'll tell her you're deliberately destroying her happiness, that you invented all of this to slander us, that you forged the documents. Evelyn will believe me. You know why? Because she loves Tyrone, and love makes people blind. She will choose us, and you will be left alone in your enormous empty house, and you will die here in solitude, and no one will even come to your funeral. I watched her and felt a curious calm settle over me. She had just handed me the final piece I needed. She had admitted, out loud, that she was prepared to manipulate Evelyn, to lie to her, to destroy her relationship with her mother, for money. Are you finished? I asked, very quietly. She picked up her handbag. You have until evening. Either money in the account, or you lose your daughter. Permanently. She turned and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the crystal in the cabinet. I sat in the silence. The chocolates on the table looked poison to me. She thought she had frightened me, thought that holding my daughter's love hostage was an unbeatable play. But she had failed to account for one thing. I had recorded our entire conversation, from first word to last. I took the recorder from my jacket pocket, small, unobtrusive. Love makes people blind, I repeated her words. Perhaps, Demetra, but the truth opens eyes, even the most infatuated ones. Now I had everything. Documents of the embezzlement, the blueprint of their fraudulent trust, and a recording of direct threats and an admission of manipulation. The trap had snapped shut,
It only remained to draw the wire tight. I called Marcus. Get the papers ready and invite those names on the list to the gala. The people Demetra was so afraid to run into 20 years ago. Tomorrow, they'll get their wedding, but the gifts won't be anything they expected. The morning of the wedding began with a piercing silence, the kind that precedes a storm. I woke before dawn, though I had barely slept. There was no fatigue, only a vibrating crystal clear focus. I chose a dress the color of dark emerald, heavy silk, severe cut, closed shoulders, no frills. Today, I was not the mother of the bride. Today, I was the judge.
By noon, the vehicles began arriving at the estate gates. Black sedans, executive class. These were not Tyrone's nightclub friends or the social lines Demetra had been so eager to impress. These were people of business, bankers, lawyers, my husband's partners, and above all, the members of the board of trustees of the charitable foundation I chaired. I stood on the upper terrace, watching the guests fill the garden. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne. A string quartet played Vivaldi. Everything looked flawless, the perfect stage for a final act. At 12:45, a white limousine arrived. Tyrone, Demetra, and Evelyn stepped out. Evelyn was in her wedding dress, but she did not look like a happy bride. Her eyes were red, her shoulders low. Tyrone, on the other hand, was radiant. He wore a tuxedo I knew he had never paid for. Demetra, in a shockingly pink ensemble, strode beside him, surveying the garden with the air of a landowner receiving her tenants. They saw the crowd of guests and exchanged a glance, triumph written plainly on their faces. They had decided I'd surrendered. "Mama!" Evelyn saw me and hurried forward. "You actually did it." "I did what needed to be done, sweetheart," I replied, kissing her cool cheek. Tyrone followed, hands in his pockets. "Well, Mrs. Johnson," he offered his trademark empty smile, "I knew we'd find a way to work things out. Magnificent organization. You've outdone yourself."
Thank you, Tyrone. I nodded. Please proceed to the altar. The ceremony will begin momentarily. Demetra seized my elbow. Her fingers bit into my arm. You made the right choice, she hissed in my ear while Tyrone guided Evelyn ahead. Smart woman. We'll forget our little disagreement. Family is family. Oh, yes, Demetra. An unforgettable family. They walked the carpet toward the flower-covered arch. Guests parted into a semicircle. Tyrone raised his chin proudly, nodding to familiar faces. And then his smile froze. He began scanning the crowd. In the front row stood Charles Warren, head of security for the bank where Tyrone had applied for a loan using falsified documents a month ago. Beside him, Anna Patricia Stewart, senior auditor for Vertex Group, the very woman who had conducted the audit after Demetra's dismissal in 1998. A little further, Marcus Chamberlain with a folder in hand, and notary Mr. Walsh, face unreadable as stone. Tyrone stopped moving. He looked at his mother. Demetra spotted Anna Patricia and shrank back, recognizing Anna Patricia.
"Tyrone," she whispered loudly, "these are not our guests. What is happening?" Tyrone turned to me. "Who are these people?" I walked slowly toward them. The music had already faded. An absolute stillness held the garden. "They are witnesses, Tyrone." "Witnesses to what?" Evelyn was looking between me and her fiancé, frightened. "Witnesses to your marriage to reality." I nodded to Marcus. He stepped forward and opened the folder. Mrs. Johnson, if this is another one of your performances, it has gone on long enough, Tyrone said tightly. Where is the officiant? There will be no officiant. I stepped to the podium. There were no rings on it, no registration book. Only a laptop connected to 2 large screens positioned at the sides of the garden. Because there will be no wedding. Have you lost your mind? Demetra shrieked. Evelyn, don't listen to her. She wants to destroy everything. Evelyn, come to me, I said quietly. Tyrone's grip on her arm eased. He released it as though burned, and Evelyn came. I pressed a key on the laptop. The screens lit up. Not a wedding montage, a scanned document, the draft of the family trust agreement. One line had been enlarged and highlighted.
Transfer of Naomi Johnson to a specialized closed care facility. A murmur passed through the crowd. What is this? Evelyn stared at the screen. This is your fiancé's wedding gift to me, I said. A plan to have me committed to a memory care institution and seize all of our family's assets. That's photoshopped, Tyrone shouted. His face was contorting. She staged all of this. And my late husband's signature, which you stole from the archives, also photoshopped? I nodded to the next slide. The handwriting analysis, the comparison between Reginald's authentic signature and the one in the trust. An expert's conclusion. Crude composite. Anna Patricia, if you would. The auditor stepped forward. Demetra Victoria Hall, she said, in the dry, professional tone of someone delivering a financial report. I'm glad to see you're well. We never received the outstanding balance from the 1998 embezzlement. With indexing and accumulated interest, the current figure stands at... Be quiet! Demetra lunged toward her. 2 security guards stepped smoothly into her path. We have full documentation, Anna Patricia said, raising her own folder, including a written admission in your handwriting. A gasp moved through the guests. The murmur became a wave of condemnation. Evelyn! Tyrone spun to her, reaching for her hands. Evelyn, this is all insane. Your mother has lost her mind. Let's leave right now. We can register somewhere else. Evelyn stood unmoving. She was reading the line about the psychiatric institution. You wanted to, she said slowly. Her voice was low, but in the garden silence, every person heard it. You wanted to have my mother put away? It's just a formality, Tyrone blurted. The lawyers recommended it, for tax purposes. For tax purposes? She repeated. Putting a living person into a care home is a tax strategy? She stepped back from him, then back again. Mama, she turned to me. Is this real? Yes, darling. And what you signed yesterday, thinking it was an insurance form, it was your consent to this plan. Evelyn covered her face with her hands. Tyrone moved toward her. I stepped between them. Don't touch her. You've destroyed everything, he snarled, his hands balling into fists. The emptiness in his eyes was gone. In its place, clean, undisguised hatred. You think this is going to go unpunished?
I looked at him without flinching. Go ahead, hit me here, in front of the bank's head of security and 2 assistant district attorneys who were enjoying my champagne at that table over there. Tyrone looked. He understood he was surrounded, not merely by people, but by the law, and it was standing on my side. This isn't over, he said quietly. You're wrong, Tyrone. I smiled. This is precisely over. But I have one last gift for you. I reached beneath the podium and produced the package with the maid's uniform.
I think you'll find this useful. Employment will be difficult to come by with a reputation like the one you just made for yourself." He stared at the gray garment as though it were a snake. Then I approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the gathering, "thank you for being here today. You expected to witness the birth of a new family. Instead, you have witnessed the burial of a lie." I pressed a button on the remote. From the speakers hidden in the flower arrangements, a voice rang out, clear, recognizable, thick with arrogance. "My mother is now the head of this household, and you will be our maid. Clean, cook, do the laundry, and maybe we'll give you a room in the attic." A sound moved through the crowd. Tyrone flinched as though he'd been struck by carnival electricity. He recognized his own voice. "That's edited," he shouted, lunging toward the podium. "She set this up."
"I wouldn't, young man," said Marcus, stepping smoothly between us. "Assaulting an older woman with this many witnesses is a chargeable offense, in addition to the fraud charges already on the table." Tyrone stopped. His eyes searched the faces around him for support and found only disgust. Notary Walsh stepped forward. "For the record, Mr. Hall appeared at my office at 9 a.m. this morning, demanding expedited registration of a property transfer based on this document. I declined due to evident signs of forgery on the late Reginald Johnson's signature and immediately contacted Mrs. Johnson." Tyrone's jaw tightened. "You were watching me?" "I was protecting what is mine," I said, "and my daughter." I turned to Evelyn. Her tears had dried, leaving mascara tracks down her cheeks. The pain had drained from her eyes. What was filling the space was something harder, cleaner, understanding. "Evelyn," I said gently, "they didn't want you. They wanted this house, and they were willing to destroy me to get it." Evelyn looked at Tyrone for a long, unblinking moment. "Tell me." Her voice was quiet, but in the garden's hush, every person present heard her. "Tell me, while looking me in the eye, did you love me, or did you love my last name?" Tyrone opened his mouth to lie. I could see the scramble behind his eyes, the effort to switch his charm back on, the charm that had worked on her before. "Evelyn, baby, of course I love you. This is all a misunderstanding. Your mother twisted everything. We just wanted
to commit my mother to a facility," she finished. He went silent. "You lied to me," she said. Not a question, a verdict. "You lied about the insurance papers, about your feelings. You even lied about your own mother." She reached down and slipped the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the sunlight one final time before she opened her hand. The ring fell against the stone terrace with a small, plaintive chime. "Leave." "Evelyn, don't do something you'll regret," Demetra interjected, reaching for her arm. "What do you mean, don't?" Evelyn yanked her arm back as though from fire. "I'm not going to spend my life as part of your scheme." "You heard my daughter," I said into the microphone. "Please leave the property." Tyrone looked around. The people on whom his career, his credit lines, and his reputation depended were looking at him the way people look at something they've stepped in. Charles Warren was already typing something on his phone, eyes fixed on Tyrone the whole time. I knew that within the hour, Tyrone would find himself blacklisted at every lending institution in the city. "Fine," Tyrone said, and spat. All pretense was gone. "Enjoy your house, you old birds. I'll find someone better, richer, younger." He turned and walked toward the gate. Demetra hitched up the hem of her absurd pink dress and scurried after him, scattering curses at the guests who stepped aside, averting their eyes. But at the gate, one last surprise waited. 2 suitcases stood there, cheap plastic,
covered in airport stickers. Tyrone stopped. "What is this?" he demanded.
"Your belongings," said Evelyn's voice. She had walked to the gate, holding a gym bag. "I packed everything from the city apartment. Security helped deliver it here. The apartment keys I've already given to my mother." She dropped the gym bag on top of the suitcases. "You packed up my things while we were on the way here?" he said, choking with rage. "I cleared the space for my life," Evelyn replied, "without lies." She turned her back on him and walked toward the house. I stepped to the gate. Security was already swinging it open, releasing them into their new, cold reality. I looked at Tyrone. "You forgot something," and I tossed him the maid's uniform. It fell directly at his feet, draping over his expensive patent leather shoes. Wear it in good health. The gate clanged shut. I heard a taxi engine idling on the other side. I had arranged it for him in advance. Economy class. I turned around. The guests were silent. Then someone began to applaud. Slowly, alone at first. It was Marcus. Then Charles Warren joined, and within a moment the garden was filled with applause. Not celebratory, not exuberant. It was the applause of respect. Respect for strength, for truth, and for justice elegantly restored. I found Evelyn with my eyes. She was standing at the fountain, arms wrapped around herself. I went to her and held her. She buried her face in my shoulder and finally let herself cry. But these were tears of release. "It's over, sweetheart," I whispered, smoothing her hair. "No, Mama." She lifted her eyes to mine, and through the tears, something new was shining there, an adult clarity. "It's just beginning." A week passed. The house filled again with the smell of old cedar and peonies. I sat on the terrace, warming my hands around a cup of Earl Grey. In the garden, in old work gloves and jeans, Evelyn was digging. She was transplanting hydrangeas, the same ones that had decorated her wedding. Beads of sweat gleamed on her forehead. There was soil under her fingernails. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter not as a marionette in a manipulator's hands, but as a living person building something real. The money set aside for the reception, we transferred to a crisis center for women. Evelyn delivered the check herself. When she came home, there was something different in her eyes. Awareness. I leaned back in my chair and opened the book line on the side table. A novel I had bought 3 years ago and never read because I had been too busy saving the family. Now I had time and silence. I no longer felt the weight of responsibility for other people's mistakes. I was not holding a defensive line. I was simply living. The sun touched the tops of the pines, gilding the garden. I rose and walked to the gate. The heavy iron key was pleasantly cool in my hand. I inserted it into the lock and turned it twice. Click, click. That was not the sound of a prison cell. That was the sound of security. I turned to face the house. Warm amber light was coming on in the windows. My home, my stronghold, my kingdom, the one I had defended. I smiled at my reflection in the dark glass and walked down the path to the front steps, feeling lighter with every stride. Freedom smelled of autumn and tea, and it was beautiful. And so ends the story of Naomi Johnson,
A story about how kindness can be mistaken for weakness and how silence can become the loudest voice in the room. Naomi showed us protecting your boundaries is not selfishness. It is survival. She did not become a victim. She became a strategist. What do you think? Did Naomi do the right thing? Was she too harsh, arranging a public exposure with all those witnesses? Or are people like Tyrone and Demetra only reached by force and public consequences? Write your thoughts in the comments. We would love to know whose side you're on.